Christian McCaffrey in the open field. Inside the 30. Inside the 20. McCaffrey touchdown.
Okay, we are live, guys. Thanks for joining us. I am Jeff Hasley, as always. I'm joined by my co-host, Cowboy Joe and Brittany Schmidt. And today, we've got a real special show for you here tonight. I just want to do a real quick introduction. We're joined by Andy Singleton and Matt Holder of ExpandTheBoxScore.com. And today's show is one that I think you guys are going to love. We're still going to talk about the Panthers and Carolina a little bit, but we want to focus a little bit more on this show here on the arts of player scouting and draft
Which is
analysis.
interesting.
So that's what we have Andy and Matt on the show here for. They're from ExpandTheBoxScore.com. We're happy to have them. We're going to talk to you about what it takes to be a draft scout, a draft analyst, and also we're going to go over some of the top prospects in this NFL draft coming up. So real quick, Andy, Matt, thanks for joining us. How are you tonight?
Everything's good. I'm just hoping you guys can hear me because apparently I'm having audio trouble, but happy to join you guys.
Right now.
All right, good. This has been a while in the works. Jeff and I have followed each other for a while. To me, he's like one of the OGs, football guy. So I was more than thrilled when he asked me if I'd jump on, and we've been planning this for a good month now. So the timing is perfect. Matt is an up-and-comer and doing phenomenal work with this 220 scouting series. He asked me, can I help him put it together? And I've just sat back and just watched the video clips and put them together and made it look a little jazzier, and that's been it. But we're happy to be here. So I'm going to shut up and let Matt talk because I really want to get his star shining.
I appreciate that, Andy. No, I appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me on. Yeah, I'm always happy to come on these things and talk ball with just about anybody. So when Andy let me know about it, I was all about it. But yeah, I mean, like Andy said, been doing some scouting. I've been covering the draft since 2019. So this will be my third draft I've covered. This is my first one with Expand the Box Score. And like Andy said, been putting together those 220 scouting videos that hopefully everybody's seen for. If you haven't, go check those out. Make sure you retweet them, like them, buy the draft guide, all that good stuff. So, but yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. As you mentioned, Andy, we've kind of known each other for a while, just on Twitter, on social media, with my background with football guys, and of course your scouting and analysis background. Let's talk about what it takes to be a scout. First of all, let's get a little bit about your background. How did you both? And I'll start with you, Andy. How did you get into analyzing draft picks and doing some player scouting, that kind of thing? How did you do it? And then maybe you could explain how others might be able to follow in your footsteps.
Yeah, so Matt and I come from very different backgrounds in the sense that I figured this out late in life. Matt's still young and has actually a chance to have a career in the NFL. As many people that follow me know, I'm a firefighter by day. I'm in my 19th year with the FDNY and started writing about 8 years ago. One of my first articles was about Aaron Hernandez and the correlations of fatherhood and just, having discipline in your life. Got about 100 views. I was really proud of it. A week later, I was a no-name. Put out my quarterback rankings, and it got 1,000 hits in like an hour. And I was like, all right, I got to start talking fantasy football. So that's how the writing started. I've just always loved prospects. My background in baseball and covering minor leagues there. So one of the things when I got into this, I think like Sigmund Bloom was one of the guys, and Matt Waldman, everybody talking about going to the Senior Bowl. So I was like, all right, I got to do that. And I just started going. And then once I started going, I was like, all right, I'm going to start talking prospects. Went to 6 straight. This would have been my 7th straight. I had to back out at the last minute with COVID stuff going on. I guess I can say it now. My wife and I are expecting, so it was still early in the game then.
Congrats.
So bombshell there. But It's just something that I've always gravitated towards, and kind of where expand the box score started. I was always looking for targets for wide receivers, could never find it. Just kept thinking every year, okay, this is the year somebody else is going to do it. This is the year, and it just never happened. So finally got together with Brian Cree, who's a friend from the industry. He's a spreadsheet guy. We put our heads together. I showed him where I would get the data from. He collected it. We worked on how to present it, and we're 2 years strong now. Going back to about maybe June, I'm going to say, I got a call from, I didn't get a call. So I got a DM saying, you got to talk to the Cyril Penn and Paul Duncan. They were going to do something with a different site. It fell through. You should just talk to them. I talked to them. They said, hey, we want to do this draft guide. We have this whole scouting team. We're all in place. We're all set to go. What do I have to lose? Sure, let's try it. And within 48 hours, it was like this was the best decision I've ever made. These guys were all professional. They're all, college graduates, scouting academy guys. Some have worked for PFF, Sports Info Solutions. This is what they want to do. So going back to like Cyril, his mentor is Mike Tannenbaum. That's how Mike Tannenbaum wound up writing the forward for the guide. So as far as the connections to the league go, like I said, like Matt is in the driver's seat to. This is really his resume. Like these 220 scouting videos, the draft guide. This is his resume and his portfolio, and this is what he's submitting to NFL teams. Going, look at the body of work I have. So for me, like I said, I'm just trying to help get these guys any direction I can, or give them any advice from the trials and tribulations I've been through. But it's been an exciting time and I'm just beyond thrilled and proud of how this guide came out. So hoping more people will check it out after watching this.
Yeah, well, cool. That's a great story, and thank you for your service being a firefighter. That's in New York. That's awesome. Matt, tell me. How did you get into this whole process and being able to break down players? When did you know that this was something that you wanted to do, and what can we tell others who have an interest in doing that as well?
Yeah, well, I kind of got into the draft because I grew up a Raider fan. So from about September to December wasn't a whole lot of fun. But in July, in the draft time or in the off season specifically, when it came to the draft, at least we had like a new energy and new hope going on. So that's how I kind of got interested in the draft. Of course, only to get disappointed for the next 20 years of my life. But no, that's kind of how I always blossomed. I've always kind of been into the draft. I've always been trying to figure out who was going to solve the Raiders. Still trying to figure that out. And whatnot, but really where my background kind of starts is when I started playing football when I was 8 years old. I was lucky enough to continue playing in high school, and I went to a high school where pretty much the 11 best players that never left the field, meaning you're on offense and defense. We weren't exactly a big school, weren't well known for our football program, so obviously got exposure doing on both sides of the ball doing that. And then I was lucky enough to be able to play in college at a small D3 school up in Oregon called Willamette University. And I came in as a blocking tight end, and we ran an offense that's called the fly, which is a lot of outside zone runs, a lot really zone heavy kind of scheme. So I got to learn that scheme. And then we got a new offensive coordinator my sophomore year who wanted to use more of an air raid system. So then I got more involvement with the passing game. His dad actually had coached that coach's dad had coached in the NFL and was a Hal Mumme disciple from University of Kentucky, who kind of was the godfather of the air raid. So I got exposure to that system. And then as the D3 ranks will, for a lot of young coaches, it's kind of like a stepping stone to something bigger. So then that offensive coordinator ended up leaving, and I got another new one in that ran more of like a kind of a combo of the two offenses. I ran a little bit more option, but the problem was he didn't want to use tight ends and tried to convert me to a big slot receiver. And if you remember, I said I was a blocking tight end, so you can imagine how that went through. But then about halfway through my junior year, my coaches and I decided, you're not a receiver. You need to go play defensive line. So I ended up playing defense for my last 2 years. And obviously at the time being, not exactly the most ideal situation, but now where I'm at now, I kind of look back on it and I'm like, well, I know 3 offenses that cover quite a bit of ground and defense now. So now it kind of helps me out now when I'm into my scouting. And then from there, I had 1 more year of grad school after I was done playing before I got my MBA at Willamette. And I I always knew I wanted to be like kind of in the GM or the scouting role or some sort, or in the media and doing the same kind of thing. So I reached out to my coaches about serving as a recruiting intern. Was able to do that and kind of learn the ins and outs and from them, get to pick their brain on what they look for in players and what sort of traits and that stuff. And then after that, I was kind of in this lull period where I was just kind of working my normal 9 to 5, wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. Started picking up writing, started covering the draft, and eventually got picked up by a few other big sites, specifically with the Raiders, to kind of cover the draft from their perspective. Ended up working for PFF for a few years and still do, getting more football knowledge, kind of learning the game from another perspective with them. And then last offseason, I felt like I needed to learn more to kind of take my scouting to the next level. Ended up enrolling in the scouting academy, finished all 8 modules there, and was able to stand out and have a couple of my reports selected for the student showcase. And then, over the summer, I reached out to Cyril actually about joining the XTB team after they went, and kind of the rest is history from there. And that's kind of where I find myself out now. So a little bit of a long-winded journey there for you guys.
No, that's good. And our own Cowboy Joe here in the bottom right is also a former player, and he's he
Awesome.
eats, sleeps, and drinks football. So I'm sure he's loving this.
I'm taking notes. I'm loving this right now. Great show today.
He probably has sympathy for players when they say, well, they're learning a new offense and, they got a new coordinator. You probably have sympathy for those guys who got to learn a new system every 2 years because they're impatient. They fire the coordinators,
Yeah. No, it hits close to home every time I see that. Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
It takes time. It really does. And some fans just don't understand that. It should be pick it up.
Yeah, it's not quite that simple. A little bit more to it than that.
Yeah.
It helps to have a background for sure. But so what would be your process of scouting a player? Are you scouting a team and therefore players on that team? Are you scouting break down your process for how you do your scouting analysis? Yeah,
so the way we kind of do is we're not reinventing the wheel here, not just picking up film and finding out which are the best players. We kind of use lists from other websites and whatnot on the up and comers, and that's actually what NFL teams doing as well. You'll hear a lot of these scouting services that they're contracted with, because even the brightest minds in the NFL, they're worried about the draft that's coming up, not the draft that's 2 years in the future. So that's kind of where we start, was we grab our list from there. And then in the summer, we just started watching 3 or 4 games to kind of get a feel for guys going into their senior years. And kind of at that point, it's more of a pick up whoever you want to take and whatnot, first come, first serve kind of deal. And then from there, it's kind of, and then once we get about halfway through the regular season is when we started turning into final reports and going back and watching the 2020 film, seeing what's different, where this guy got better, where he got worse, yada, yada, and then putting together our final reports. So when it's all said and done, everybody's probably has at least 6 games under their belt from the 2 years. And then sometimes up to 8 or 10, depending on the position or the player, and putting together the final reports and putting together that draft guide that you guys see. So.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so interesting, not to cut anyone off, but I think that it's fascinating just how far back, like even before their senior year, just how soon you start watching them. Because I know like someone like me, as a diehard Panther fan, since, I'm here in New Jersey right now, but we're going back to the Sam Mills era where I watched that game where he intercepted the Jets and they got the touchdown, and it was so magical. Anyway, but it's fascinating because I really didn't know. I just was like, oh, these are the players that are entering the draft.
Right.
Let me see who I want. Let me watch their film. Like, I feel like I kind of come into it late in the game, whereas I don't realize behind the scenes, analysts, such as yourself.
These are the guys that did their homework on it.
Are watching like at the end of their going into their senior year from the summer. Like, I think that it's very fascinating. I didn't know just how far back it goes. So I learned.
Well, to jump in here, what's interesting is like any industry, once you get into it, you start seeing the different levels and layers to it. And one of the things that jumped out to me when I first started going to the Senior Bowl was, this starts in Pop Warner. So there are guys that are just follow. I mean, we all know this. Rivals 24/7, like the high school recruiting and everything like that. But you see the differences at this stage where somebody like Rondell Moore was one of the most highly regarded guys coming out of high school, ran something ridiculous like a 4.23 or 4.32 in high school, and then had a phenomenal freshman year, had 2 years that were kind of marred with injury, and now you see the people that are just hearing his name for the first time and kind of discounting who he is, and then the other people who have been there since day one and are like, no, this guy is legit. So, when he runs a 4.29 today or whatever it is, it's like, who is this guy? And you just see the difference of, how it varies so much, and people really are trusting, shows like this, guys like us, to really kind of give you the background on things. So,
yeah, it's always funny. I was, being in my role, kind of have take a step back because I'll see so-and-so's a sleeper. I'm like, sleeper? I've known about this guy for 4 months. What are you talking about?
You'll define sleeper, right?
Yeah.
Let me ask you too. Either one of you can answer this. Like, best example is this year. Like, guys who opted out of the season, does that kind of throw a wrench into how you evaluate them?
Does that hurt
I mean, how much does that really hurt their stock since they didn't play a year?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the guy. I think a guy like Jamar Chase who opted out, I think he honestly benefited from it because we saw how LSU's season goes. Now, maybe you make the argument that Jamar Chase is there, things go better. But I think, for him, he was already touted as like the best wide receiver in the class. And I mean, still pretty much is, there might be some debate at the top, but not much. And I think, had he come back and maybe didn't have quite the production that he had the year before, which, I mean, going from 2,000 yards, that's a high bar to set. So, I mean, he's definitely going to dip like that. So I think for someone like him, like where his situation ended up being pretty bad, I think it kind of helps, but then there were guys that, like the biggest one that sticks out to me right now is Caleb Farley, where like, again, for me personally, like I look at it as like, I get it. COVID's a weird situation. Like I'm not going to fault anybody for opting out, but when it's a matter of, okay, I don't have any 2020 film on you. Right. And now you have a back issue. Okay, now I'm a little bit more hesitant to spend the top 10 pick on you because this is going to be this is my 7-figure job, And that's I think it depends on the guy. I'm trying to think of maybe some other guys that might have been hurt by not coming back. The other one that comes to mind would be like a Gregory Rousseau, who obviously had a huge season last year, had like 15 sacks or whatever. But, and I said this on another podcast, and I hesitate to say this, he had the most unimpressive 16 sack season I've ever seen, meaning it was kind of a lot of coverage sacks, a lot of him winning with 1 or 2 moves. So if I'm a scout, if I'm a GM, I'm like, well, that's a great season, but I really would have liked to see him replicate it again. I'd like to see, personally, I'd like to see a guy win with multiple different moves and whatnot in the pass rush department. But if he keeps winning with those 2 moves, if he keeps, has his 2 moves that he's just really good at, and he did it again, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to say, maybe this guy's just got 2 really freaking good moves that he can win with, and it'll be effective at the next level. But you leave that doubt by him not coming back. And again, like I'm personally not going to fault anybody for it. I get it. But, there is some sort of apprehension of like, okay, I would have liked to see you come back and run and do better, or, repeat the same amount of success.
And I don't think it really hurt anybody. I mean, taking one of your guys and Christian McCaffrey, he opts out of the bowl game to train for the draft. These guys have been doing that for a full year now. So you look at a guy like Kenny Gainwell, who people had questions on. He runs out, he goes and runs a 4.4 or whatever, and measures at 200 pounds, and all of a sudden everybody's like, all right, we believe it. I think it hurt guys like Micah Parsons, who people just are going to question middle linebackers regardless, especially when you see like what happened with Isaiah Simmons last year. And it's just that was going to be inevitable. So add in a missed season and it just creates even more speculation and doubt. But I mean, these guys, it's muscle memory. It's riding a bike. They didn't do it's not like they were sitting on a beach for a year. They were all training. They were all working out. And I don't think it affects anybody in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and to piggyback off Andy's point, I think a lot of those guys, the big thing is going to be the testing numbers. That's where we're going to see if guys, if guys were working out. If their numbers should be great, their numbers should be, in the top percentile. If they're going to be, if they spent, a year or whatever it's been training just for that and training just for that. Whereas, like you see a guy like, I don't know how much you guys paid attention, but like Paris Ford ended up opting out about halfway through the year and then ended up running a 4.9 at safety. that tells me not only is that not fast enough, that tells me you didn't do anything. Right. You know what I mean? Or if you did, you really need to fire your trainer.
Yeah, the biggest difference with the COVID year is, to me, not having the combine. And I know people are saying, oh, well, the pro days are close enough. And you know what? They're really not. They're going to get you in the ballpark, but it's GMs are really, really, really relying on their scouting departments this year, and there are going to be some surprises, I think, for sure. Definitely some. I think that you're going to see more busts and way more sleepers or surprises as a result of the guys that really knew what they were doing and were already in the game prior to COVID coming.
Mm-hmm. Right, and people are going to rely on you guys more for information in regards to, hey, which players should I be watching, and you can also just I want to say the fact that your draft guide that I have scrolling down on the bottom here at expandtheboxscore.com, just a great draft guide. I mean, you've got a ton of players, a lot of information. Even just reading up on 5 or 10 players, and it takes like a half an hour to do that. I mean, there's so much content in there, so it's definitely worthwhile. I just want to
only $12, people. Let's get it.
And it's for a great price too. So.
That was on them. I wanted to charge $1,000. They told me that might be too much. I said, "Do you see how much work you guys did? I think that's fair." They said, "No, we got to make it a little cheaper." But in all honesty, there's 341 reports on in this guide. We have grades on every player. We have 8 traits that we graded for every player, their strengths, their weaknesses, the scheme they were in, things they need to work on, and then a short, concise summary if you just want to skip through and just read the summary. The presentation, I got to pat myself, I think is beautiful. It reads well, cover to cover. And this is not for, like I said, there's 341 reports in there, and there's more coming. We have long snappers in there. We have punters. We have kickers. Like, we have every position covered, and it's not for the first round guys. It's really for the middle rounds, which is really where NFL teams are going to win their draft. Mm-hmm. And if you're a fantasy player, the dynasty league, that's where I think I saw in the notes mentioning Terry McLaurin, and maybe we'll get into that later. He was not a surprise to me at all last year, and it's amazing how many people were like, yeah, I don't want to make that mistake again. Well, get this guide, and you're going to know who's who, and you're not going to make those mistakes.
Yeah, and I think the middle rounds is where people get, like, of course, everybody knows the much toted about, like, the top picks for each position, but it's good to know those middle guys, too, that kind of sometimes get lost in, like, the excitement and the hype of the more bigger name, well-known players. And so I do think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing for any kind of football fan, whether you're a Panthers fan, whether you're any kind of fan. It's just a great thing to invest in, more football knowledge.
Yes.
So I have so many questions for you guys. Like, for example, how do you get your material out in front of these, decision makers on, NFL staffs? Do they come to you? Do you go to them? Are you back and forth with each other? How does that even work?
In which regard? Like getting it to teams and things of that nature?
Yeah, and just kind of starting the conversation, the ball rolling, where they're asking you questions about a player or whatever, or just kind of talk a little bit about how that goes down.
I'm gonna let Matt talk a little more, but really, it's like everything else. It's networking. Yeah. It's just contacts. It's who you know. Building that rapport. This profession, this industry is all who you know. That's why you see guys like Adam Gase continue to get head coaching jobs, even after his
he knows Peyton Manning.
I mean, just the fact that he's in the running to be, Alabama's OC, like, it's because it's who you know. So
the answer is yes, Andy is a Jets fan.
Yes, exactly.
So is my father and brother. So.
There you go. But yeah, no, it's just who you know. And honestly, one thing I've learned in life, and this was really, and not to try to bring it back to FD or, anything like that, but 9/11 for me was kind of like, don't leave anything on the table. And you got to have balls. And, you see somebody, don't, say something, introduce yourself. You might swing and miss, but you're never going to know if you don't get the bat off your shoulders. So don't be shy is really like the biggest thing, and start building from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what Andy said is the biggest thing is networking. Like Andy said at the beginning, one of our scouting directors, his mentor is Mike Tannenbaum, and I believe he helped a lot, just kind of being able to forge those relationships and kind of start to meet people. And that was the biggest thing is, like I said, just using our relationships that we had to be able to get them in the hands of the right people. And then the other part was just flat out cold emailing. Like, I mean, I think a lot of people get kind of nervous and think like, oh, they're not going to read my email, and like, which could very well be true. Just another person that says, look at my resume or look at my draft guide, can easily be skipped over in a GM's email. But that thing is, you never know until you send that email, and that's kind of like the philosophy. Like we've kind of approached or taken, and everyone on our team has. Like I know we have one person on our team, Shay, who's she's trying to break in as a scout, and then she has I think her pinned tweet is about a letter about that thick, or a folder about that thick of all the emails she sent to different people where she's heard nothing back. A folder that's about that thick with all the rejections, and then one that's not quite that's pretty thin on the yeses or the kind of the maybes. So it's one of those things where you might send out 100 emails, you might get 20 replies. 19 of them are no's, but all that matters is that one yes, and that's kind of
and I imagine, not to cut you off, but I imagine social media would be a very big outlet in getting your content out. Like, in dealing with those no's, instead of just being like, oh, here's my resume, here's my, look at it. When you're putting we live in such a very tech savvy world where it's very easy to be your own best self promoter in a way. So does that play on? I imagine it would play a very big role in getting yourself out there as well.
Definitely.
I would say no. I would disagree there. I would say more so with the following or a fan base if you're a writer or something like that, and less with actually, with actual teams if you're trying to break in. I mean, there are very few coaches that actually are, or I can't think of any scouts that come to mind that even have Twitter. Like, they might be on it looking at things, but they're not on it interacting. So finding somebody that way, I think, is less likely. But one other thing I want to touch on, you said, getting them to listen to you. It kind of goes back to the writing and the social media aspect in that regard. I think they're less. I think people are more willing to accept you being wrong on a player. It's not like you have to have a 90% success rate or hit rate. It's how you sell your argument. If you have a process and, these are the reasons I vouch for this guy. If that guy turns out to be, Isaiah Wilson? If that guy turns out to be Isaiah Wilson and is just, a lost cause, like, you might have had that in your scouting report, like, off-field issues. But as far as a player goes, if he fails, point being, if you can have backing to your process and your thought process and why you're vouching for somebody, that's going to carry a lot more weight than the actual hit or miss with the player, because it's paper thin, the difference separating most of these guys.
Yeah. And I mean, to piggyback off that, I think one of the things that I try and always tell people that, are coming up or I'm working with is I don't care about the what, I care about the why. You can tell me Trevor Lawrence is good, but if you can't tell me why, then I don't care. I know you don't know what you're talking about, or the other way around. If you want to say Trevor Lawrence is bad, okay, that's fine, but tell me why. And, from there, it's a matter of, like, are you actually know what you're looking at and whatnot? We can get into that, but the why is always going to be more important especially when it comes to scouting, than the what. And at the end of the day, like, there are plenty of football players that make it for plenty of reasons. There are plenty of football players that don't make it for plenty of reasons. And there are plenty of examples of every type of player making it and every type of player not making it. So as long as you can back up your argument and, know what you're talking about, you're going to stay strong in your take, I guess, the best way I could phrase that one.
So, Matt, that's actually a pretty good segue, because I want to get into the ins and outs and the guidelines of what teams look for, when they're scouting certain positions, right? Different players at different positions, like quarterbacks, right? Obviously, the skill is important, but there's intangibles there that I'm sure come into play. So if you could just kind of break that down a little bit by each position, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end being like, the main positions here. What are you looking for, and what are teams looking for from a player out of those positions?
Yeah, so I'm glad you kind of broke the question up a little bit at the end there, because I think there's two different ways to look at it. There's one to look at it from like a scout's perspective, For example, if I'm a scout for the Panthers, the first thing we're going to do at the beginning of the offseason is I'm going to meet with, the head coach and the GM, and we're going to go over what players we want to look for and what type of players, whether that be a running back who's better in a gap scheme, or a running back that's better in a zone scheme, or, a corner that's good in press coverage versus a corner that's good enough, so there's that meeting that happens. And then as a scout, my job is to go out in my area and then kind of just find those players that fit that mold. I'm still collecting data and still writing reports on everybody I watch, but I'm really kind of harnessing on what we're looking for and focusing on that. Whereas for me and my perspective and what I try and do is I don't have that meeting because obviously we're in the media, don't have a team that I'm working for. I'm trying to do this for 32 different teams. Mm-hmm. So I get to skip that meeting. But what I kind of focus my evaluation on is, what is this player good at? Where do I trust this guy? Is this offensive lineman going to be someone who's, good in pass protection, but maybe he's not as good of a run blocker? Is this guy going to be someone who's going to be better in a zone scheme or a power scheme and that kind of stuff? So from a scout, an actual scout perspective, you're kind of looking for what your boss tells you to do versus what I'm doing or what we're doing at XCB and the media end of it. You're kind of just looking for, what is this player good at and where do I trust this? Now, obviously, you want to touch on the negatives and paint the picture, but that's one of the biggest things that I try and focus on with every player is more, where can I trust this guy? Where is this guy good rather than where is he not? At the end of the day, everyone wants to know where this player is going to succeed, not necessarily fail, unless you're sick and pessimistic in the head. I don't know. But, as far as position specific, I think it kind of goes back to what I was talking about before. What are we looking for? For quarterback, do we want a guy that has a big arm and we're okay with sacrificing some accuracy? Or are we like the Saints and Sean Payton, who, they'll sacrifice some of the arm strength with a guy like Drew Brees, but they'll look for someone who's more accurate and that kind of stuff. And then running backs is kind of the same thing. Are we a zone team or are we a power team? Do we want a guy that's going to be a little bit more patient in the backfield and kind of find the hole in the zone scheme? Or do we want a guy that's going to get the ball, make one read, one cut and go? So that's kind of like the high level of it too. And it kind of goes the same way throughout positions. Am I looking for receivers? Am I looking for a possession guy? Am I looking for a run after the catch guy and that kind of stuff? So it varies. I guess the way to answer that would be, it varies on scouting department. And then, from the media angle, again, it's more about finding out what this guy's good at.
Right.
Yeah, gotcha. I definitely think there's more. The fantasy game and the pro game intersect in a lot of ways, and some they draw similar comparisons, and others they completely vary, widely. For the most part, though, you hear BPA, best player available, all that kind of stuff. NFL teams are much less likely to go that route as opposed to finding guys who actually fit their scheme and what they're looking for with that specific coaching staff at what any given time. So the way we're viewing players is totally different. Like when we're watching drafts, how do you pass on this guy? How do you pass on that guy? It's because they don't have that position in their pecking order prioritized to the same level that you do as a fan. So an example of that to me is like last year seeing CeeDee Lamb go to Dallas. That was a case of best player available. This guy slipped a little. And it was, okay, we like the other positions we have greater need there, but we can dominate this aspect of, the positional tree. And that's why you saw a guy go there as opposed to, we like the Jets, for instance, going back to the Jets. I'm screaming at the TV every pick, every round, just passing on receivers because we needed one. And when you see they land Denzel Mims, you're like, okay, it works, but that obviously was less of a priority for what they were trying to fill their needs with. So
I'm laughing not at you, but because that just, my dad and brother are like huge Jets fans, like diehard, and it just sounds like my house growing up, like watching the draft, my dad and my brother just yelling at the TV.
Yes. And
I always see the Jets fans in denial at the NFL draft. It's always them, but
irate tweets and screaming at the TV.
So I want you guys to kind of pat yourselves on the back a little bit here, and I want you to call your shot if you can. Give us some examples of players that you nabbed as as those who are going to have a future success in the NFL who went on and did, from a positive aspect, and also some, and we'll look at some film here in a little bit. But who are some players this year that are kind of under the radar that you think are a pretty good gem for some teams?
You want to go first, Matt?
You can take it if you want.
All right. I mean, I'll just go quick with recency bias, but I mentioned McLaurin earlier. He was polarizing going into Senior Bowl week, primarily because his stat line just didn't make sense. Like you play for you're in a receiving corps that's basically a track team. You have 39 receptions and like 17 touchdowns. I know I'm exaggerating a little, but it was like it just didn't make sense. Like something's not adding up here. This is a product of the system. But wait, he's got good size. Wait, he's got good speed. What really sold him for me was his Senior Bowl week, and that's one of the great things that you get to see at events like that, or being around teams, going to practices, things like that, where it wasn't what he was doing on the field so much as what he was doing off the field, what he was doing with his teammates. He had a switch that he was the nicest guy off, when he wasn't in the play, and then he would flip the switch and was a dog. And he was clapping up all his teammates. He was fighting for everything. He was like, I don't want to say dirty, but he'll get in the mud kind of guy. And then plays over, okay, nicest guy. You could see this guy, with the smoking jacket in the library. Like he was just very classy. And then some of the post practice interviews and getting to talk with him and stuff like that, he was just talking about his parents, and he had a girlfriend, and they were waiting to have kids until they got married and all that kind of stuff. He's just sitting there going, wow, this guy's like grounded. Football is an occupation that he loves, but it's it was just a different
invested, right?
Right, it was just a different story. So I was and I was big on him, and then sure enough, he has blossomed and become one of the better receivers in the league. So there's a hit. A miss I'll give you real quick was same thing was Marcel Aitman a few years back from Oklahoma State. I mean, this guy just was a tightrope walker on the sidelines and the end lines. He had a huge frame, caught everything, just really played well in everything you looked at. I thought he was going to be a surprise. Had one good game with the Raiders, had an opportunity, but going back to what I was saying before about this being razor thin with certain guys, situation and opportunity means everything. I remember getting into a little DM back and forth with Jonathan Williams, former Arkansas running back, and because I was knocking him because people kept trying to hype him up 3 years running. And I was like, can we, get off this already? And then he starts DMing me like, it's opportunity, man. It's opportunity. And I'm like, I get it, but that counts. So if you're not getting opportunities, there's a reason for that as well.
Let me ask you this, Andy. You're a Jet fan, right?
No.
No?
Yes.
What would you not be a Jet? Well, here's what I want to ask you. 2 years ago, the guy from Florida, what was his name that the Jets took? Polite?
Oh, yeah.
He was people were ranking him like a first-round talent, and then he slipped to the third, and now he's kind of falling off the radar. Did you foresee that happening?
Yeah, I wasn't big on him. He wasn't necessarily one of the guys I was heavy in watching or scouting. Definitely the name was prevalent, but it wasn't somebody that jumped out at me. I didn't see any. I don't want to say I foresaw what happening, but I'm not shocked at it. If that helps.
What about this year? You guys want to call your shot on some players this year that are under the radar?
Yeah, I mean, my guy before I answer that one, my guy from the years past is I'm going to go more recently with Max Crosby. He was a guy that I ended up watching and ended up loving his tape a lot. I thought he was extremely athletic for his size at defensive end, and I kind of watched him. I remember watching him and wasn't too involved in him until the Raiders had actually after they drafted him, and I ended up watching him more because of that. And I watched the film and immediately I'm like, this guy's going to start for them as a rookie. Like this guy's going to walk in probably one of the best defensive linemen. And I mean, now I don't think that's even a disputed take anymore with how poor the rest of the Raiders defensive line has been. And then the other guy I've always kind of touted my hat for was actually before I started covering the draft too much. And I know he wasn't too much of like a sleeper or anything like that or really at all. But was Amari Cooper, if you guys remember, Yeah, if you guys remember, back in what was it, 2015, there was a big debate about Kevin White or Amari Cooper, and Amari Cooper was a guy I remember watching him as a freshman at Alabama. I'm like, this guy's gonna be good, and then obviously he ended up having a hell of a career.
You have to see those Miami games with him in Bridgewater.
Yes.
Oh my God, that was a duo.
Yeah, they were. They had quite the. Cooper ended up having quite the career. I mean, obviously, I think he's better than Kevin White. I feel pretty confident in saying that right now. So, but yeah, and then I think for this year, my guy throughout the process has been Austin Watkins out of UAB. He's not getting a whole lot of love. I have questions about his speed, which is I think why a lot of people aren't talking about him as much. But I mean, his change of direction is absolutely unreal. It's one of the best in this draft class. I honestly believe that, and he's going to be probably a 4th or 5th round guy. There were games against the Conference USA opponents where I swear corners were like looking over the wrong shoulder, trying to figure out where he was, putting double moves on guys that were just creating like 10 yards of separation, and it was just a joy to watch. And I feel like he's going to end up being a better pro than he was in college. He was a JUCO transfer, ended up redshirting his first year at UAB. And UAB ran the ball a ton. For example, he was the 3rd player in school history to have 1,000 yards receiving in 2019. So that should paint with modern day football, that should paint a pretty good picture for you and what kind of offense UAB like to run, which I think is also a big part of why he's not getting as much love. But yeah, that's my guy for this year, Austin Watkins. So if your team ends up picking him up on day 3, be happy.
There you heard it here first, right? So, hey, this is still a Carolina show, so we want to still talk about some possibilities for the Panthers. And a lot of people are thinking that they're going to go quarterback with their 8th pick in the draft.
I say punter.
Sorry?
I say punter, but
yeah, right. So my question to you guys, first of all, if you can, and we've got some film to break down that you have here for the top 4 quarterbacks, and we can watch that and we can talk about that. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence is the top pick, right? Jacksonville's getting a winner here, but what do you think Carolina should do in terms of should they go get their guy? Should they wait at 8? Who do you think is a good fit for them? I'm just kind of curious what your take is on the remaining quarterbacks after Lawrence that would also be a good fit for Matt Rule and the Panthers.
Can I ask you real quick though, how, as being insiders with the team, how serious were these rumors of 3 firsts and Christian McCaffrey for Deshaun Watson? I mean, is this
hearsay?
Hearsay. It was. We happened to the writer that actually spoke about this, David Newton. We're not exactly as a fan base fond of him. We kind of just tolerate him. I always joke around when I moved to Carolina, I'm going to take his job. So no, but like seriously though, it was an interview. He said what he thought, and basically it took on a life of its own, and that's what happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there's much basis to it.
Because to me that that says a lot as far as what direction they go at 8, because I don't think this team has as many holes as we want to believe. Like I love the picks they made on defense last year. That's a young, exciting, up and coming defense. That defenses take a little while to blossom and gel and acclimate themselves to the league. And you had several key positions that were rookies last year, and they showed spurts. And I think you're another year, or I should say another 2 years away from this being kind of back to what you had, a few years ago when you're going to the Super Bowl. I would love to see them add another middle linebacker there. I like what they did on the edge. How can you not love Chin?
I love Chin.
And then on offense, I mean, obviously, you lose Curtis Samuel, but I don't know that they were necessarily using him right anyway. You have McCaffrey. You have some holes, but I don't know that quarterback is the most glaring need. So to me, I don't think it's a desperation play to take a quarterback at 8. And when you look at the guys that, Rule had at the Senior Bowl, I mean, I've seen people go from somebody like me, and I'm not alone in this, that Kyle Trask is a borderline first-round talent, to he's not even draftable. and everything in between. Well, Matt Rule worked with him, so if he liked what he saw and believes him in enough, you don't need that at 8. You can wait to the second or third round to get that. You also have Mac Jones there. Mac Jones should be there at 8, so you don't have to make any trades really to get up for that need. But I don't even think it's as big of a need as the mockers, and I get that's why mock drafts confuse you so much. But yeah, I don't know that that's the biggest need.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think like what you said, like when we started it off with how serious the rumors were, I mean, Mike Davis just today signed a 2-year deal with the Atlanta Falcons. So, I mean, I think that goes to show that the Panthers are all in on Christian McCaffrey because, those of you who, maybe caught a couple Panthers games, but maybe aren't like every week watching the Panthers, he filled in for McCaffrey while he was for the games that he missed. And he did well. And he did very well. Basically, Mike was looking, to be the place where he could be the star, and I think he would have that with Atlanta, even though he's dead to me because that's a rival.
Right.
Sorry, Mike.
What's the biggest need for the Panthers? Saying the offensive line?
Every team
offensive
could
line,
use an
corner,
offensive
linebacker. I mean, quarterback. I mean, they have big needs.
Merriman, that was a good pickup for at linebacker.
I mean, yeah.
I think Bridgewater needs one more good year with CMC in the back to see what he can really do, and I think he can manage the game. He'll be a great game manager, and I think you need to build that line first before going after a top star quarterback.
Would you? Yeah. So would you say like a Sewell?
Yes.
Or would he be gone?
That's why my draft's
gone.
got me confused because they have him going to Dallas now.
Yeah, I get the
like
feeling
that.
that Sewell's not going to be there. I never want to be he's not going to be there guy because I mean I was like we were talking about CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb was not going to be there at 17 and ended up being there, but Penei Sewell I kind of got to be there. He's not going to be there guy for that one. I mean he for us is he's the number 2 overall, and I mean he has the same grade as Trevor Lawrence. And I mean if I'm doing it on my personal board, I'm going to have Trevor Lawrence ahead of Penei on the personal board just because he plays the premium position. But as far as like grade for grade, I actually kind of like Penei Sewell better just as a player. I legitimately think he's like the next Jonathan Ogden, like the next prospect. Yeah, I mean, I hate to be that guy, but if he's there, I mean, they should sprint up. I mean, any team should be sprinting up to the podium. Like, make sure it's real. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, people want to know about the quarterbacks, because everyone still thinks that. Hey, well, not everyone. Obviously, a couple people don't. But how do you rank those 4 quarterbacks there, Matt?
Yeah, so we've got it's kind of chalk, I guess, if you will. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence is going to be number 1 for us. Then we have Justin Fields number 2. I know there gets a little bit of ambiguity from there. And then Zach Wilson number 3 and Trey Lance number 4. I think for Carolina specifically, I kind of do like, if they do want to go with the quarterback, I do like the Trey Lance situation. Just because for me, like you guys kind of said, like I'm a Teddy Bridgewater fan. I've always liked the guy coming out of Louisville. I don't think he's a great quarterback. I think like you guys said, he's got a good stopgap. But that's exactly what I think a guy like Trey Lance is going to need, because one of my biggest issues with Trey Lance, and again, we were talking about before with the COVID situation, is Trey Lance has basically started 1 season and 1 game at the FCS level. So if you're looking at a guy like that, or if I'm an NFL GM, I don't know if I want to put my 7-figure salary on a guy that has only played at a lower level and has only started for 1 season. But with the Panthers, they're kind of a unique situation where they have, a serviceable starter in Teddy Bridgewater. So I think they can take, Trey Lance, keep Teddy Bridgewater around for a year, and then kind of ease Trey Lance into the game, because as we all know, just ask Tua Tagovailoa, who played at Alabama and started for multiple years in the best conference in the country. The jump from college to the NFL is huge.
Right.
Now imagine doing that from an FCS school to going straight to the NFL, and you didn't have a season last year. Like, that's not going to be an easy transition. And I just worry about with him is, if he's not going to have the greatest transition, how is that going to ruin his confidence? Is he going to have, 20 interceptions? How is that going to ruin his development. So if I'm Carolina, I'm definitely kicking the tires on that situation. I don't know necessarily if I'd trade up for a guy like Trey Lance. That's probably wouldn't be my preference. But if that's their guy, then hey, you got to get a quarterback in this league, and if that's how you really feel about it, then do what you need to do. But I think Trey Lance would be a great fit for Carolina just because of that fact that they have somebody in there right now. And they can kind of ease him into the game. And I think he has a lot of tools that you're going to like as a quarterback, including a big arm and some great deep ball accuracy. The biggest problem I see with that happening, and it's can potentially really hurt, is you can say the same thing about Atlanta at 4. And if that happens, Atlanta, obviously they have Matt Ryan there. They have kind of a similar situation where they might be looking for a stock or a quarterback of the future that's not necessarily going to play this year. And then if Trey Lance is good, he's terrorizing your team for 2 weeks a year for the next 3 to 4 years, which is, kind of the nightmare situation if you're Carolina in that regard. But that's going to be the only problem. I think Trey Lance would be a good option for him from that standpoint. As far as a scheme fit goes, I know when we were talking about this pre-snap or pre-show, you wanted to, dive into Joe Brady's offense. That would be Lance for me would be the opposite of kind of what Joe Brady's had to work with so far. If you think back to Joe Brady when he goes back to the Saints, obviously he was working with Drew Brees, who, like we mentioned at the beginning of the show, more the accurate guy, less the arm strength. Joe Burrow, kind of the same thing, better at throwing guys open, not as much arm strength. And then Teddy Bridgewater kind of fits that same mold. But what I hesitate to say that's kind of the quarterback that Joe Brady likes is that each of his stops, he was an offensive assistant in New Orleans. He's not going to come in and say, "Hey, I need you guys to get rid of this Hall of Fame quarterback to come run my offense." If he said that, we wouldn't be talking about Joe Brady. No one would know who Joe Brady is. Right. And then he goes to LSU, where Joe Burrow was the returning starter. He didn't recruit him and whatnot, and kind of worked with him there. Ultimately, he's going to have some influence in Carolina a little bit as the OC, but he's still not the head coach, not the GM. So I hesitate to say that that's the kind of quarterback that Joe Brady actually looks for or wants. Like, he could very well want a big arm quarterback like a Trey Lance, like a Zach Wilson. He just hasn't been able to work with one yet, and that's kind of the mystery of it all. If it is he's looking for those guys that are accurate in the shorter areas and maybe can move their feet a little bit. Obviously, Drew Brees isn't that, but someone like Joe Burrow or Teddy Bridgewater more fits that mold. It'd be the target they'd be looking at would be Justin Fields. And then you get into the discussion of, do we need to trade up for this guy? Because I don't know if he's going to be there at 8, and it's kind of the ambiguity, and that's where it gets a little bit hairy. But yeah, it's an interesting situation in Carolina. I'm not really sure what direction they would want to go with the quarterback, and I think there's a lot of disagreement on quarterbacks 2 through 4, and probably even 5. I'm sure there's some people who have Mac Jones or maybe even a Kellen Mond as a surprise in that category as well. But yeah, it'll be an interesting thing to see what they do.
Yeah, I have a totally different take on that. I've had Trey Lance as my QB2 since as far back as at least December. That was scoffed at. It's starting to gain some speed or some traction. I don't think he makes it past Atlanta. It's either somebody trades up to get him. Hopefully the Jets can trade down, going back to the Jets. We're going to make this the Jets fandom show by the end of it. But,
the Jets-Panthers collaboration podcast.
There you go. But I don't think Trey Lance gets past Atlanta. The best thing you guys have going for you is you got the coach right and the coaching staff as a result of that. And I say that because players believe in him. And more than that, he believes in himself. So he feels like he can mold whatever clay he's given. So I don't think they're looking for necessarily the stud that, okay, we have to kind of force feed that. So when you look at 8, a guy that I think would be there or should be there, it's possible he's not. But and this brings you back to your glory days. And not that I don't love Ian Thomas, but Kyle Pitts makes so much sense there for me. Fills a need. It helps on the line. It addresses kind of 2 problems at once. It gives you another receiving option, and you have that stud locked up, and you go that route. Well, not to sound like I'm a Kyle Trask lover, but you could then get him with your 79th pick or 73rd pick, and now you have your quarterback to learn from and a guy that worked with him. So to me, QB is. I'm going to maintain that QB is not your priority, or shouldn't be your priority. It wouldn't be if I was, drafting for Carolina. But I would hope Pitts was there.
I mean, and I like Kyle Pitts. I really do. I think that he's definitely, like you said, a stud. I wouldn't be sad with that pick.
I would say that in tight ends from Pitts to the next guy, it's probably the biggest drop off of any position in the draft, in my opinion. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, it's a pretty big. It's not a huge. It's not a huge step, but it's socially distanced.
We're 6 feet apart.
6 feet apart.
Hey, so I want to talk about cornerbacks because Carolina definitely could use some. They could use a number one corner. They don't really have one. And we've got Patrick Surtain. We've got Caleb Farley. Those are two possibilities. What about a little bit later though in the draft? Who are some guys that might make some sense for them?
Yeah, falling down a little bit. I mean, you have to me, you have a solid handful. You have a solid 5 or so at the top. It depends on what you think of what you already have in tow. I mean, if you're looking a little further down, you're going to wind up with a guy like an Elijah Molden, who's going to be a nice nickel corner from day one, which is a huge need now. So he's not going to be your shutdown, lockdown CB1, but he's going to be a big impact. I personally think I would rather see like somebody in the middle, a linebacker. You mentioned bringing Perryman in. He started as a middle linebacker. I see him being listed on the outside now. I love them. I'm a Miami fan by day. That's another story for another show. But he just hasn't materialized to be, that every down guy. So somebody that I personally love, and we were talking about calling shots before. 39, I would hope Nick Bolton is there. That guy just gives me Demario Davis type vibes where he's going to be having 100+ tackles for, the next decade. So if you can land a guy like that to man the middle and you got the young studs on the edge and then, on the interior of that D line, and then you got Chin and fill in a couple guys in the back. To me, that 3 years away from being a top 5 defense.
Yeah, I mean,
by the way, you gave a lot of Jet fans heart attack with that Miami comment.
Not Dolphins, Hurricanes.
Okay, we're good then.
The closest we have to a D1 program in New York City is Rutgers.
I was gonna say there's going to be Jets fans on life alert here.
I can just picture Jet fans looking at each other like, what?
What?
No, but on a side note to that, I mean, Brian Flores is from 5 minutes, not even 5 minutes away from where I live, so I got to be kind of partial to them. And my brother is a Dolphins fan because he fell in love with Dan Marino at an early age. So
was it Ace Ventura?
I don't know many people across the board who didn't at least have a great deal of respect for just a great such as Dan Marino. I know before the Panthers were a team, before I saw that game, I wasn't a Dolphins fan per se, but I was a Dan Marino fan because you guys remember that movie Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, and he was in it.
He just mentioned it.
Then I wanted to watch every game that he played the Jets. I wanted to watch him play. After seeing that movie, that actually, believe it or not, that movie is corny and it's funny, and I mean I still watch it.
For me, Marino was Isotonic Gloves. Yeah, that's what happened.
And I'll tell you this, Dan Marino.
The laces were in.
Dan Marino is a beautiful man. I had the pleasure of sitting next to him on a plane. And,
wow.
He's a giant and he's a beautiful man.
But yes, and then it was all over come when the Panthers played the Jets, and my dad was very relieved that I'd moved on from the Dolphins, but it's the rivalry there.
I'll take this shot at the Dolphins. The only reason he can wear isotoners is because he has no rings to get in the way.
Love it.
I mean, that was a beautiful burn.
This burn brought to you by expandtheboxscore.com.
And Isotonic Gloves.
$12 a month.
Make sure you don't wear any wings when you wear our gloves.
I feel like we could be talking about this for another hour at least, and we
Yeah.
haven't even gotten to videos and stuff, and going over these player evals. We just it hasn't really it hasn't really been like the right timing. We're talking about other stuff here.
No, this is great though. This show is
Yeah.
great right now. The way it's going is perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, as far as like, if someone is watching this, they're young and they're excited, they're eager, they're big fans of football, but they probably played and they want to get involved into something like this, either as an analyst or as a scout. What would you recommend? I mean, you mentioned networking and stuff, but what can they do? Who do they need to talk to? How can they get their kind of their foothold in getting into this type of business?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is, making sure you kind of have that background info, or background knowledge beforehand. People in the NFL and people in the public eye too, they can sniff out a fraud a mile away. If you don't really know what you're talking about, you're going to get caught. Either if it's not right away, it's going to be soon. So I think that's kind of like the step one, whether that be doing something like, reaching out to your local high school or reaching out to your local college or whatnot and seeing if you can get involved in volunteering or any way, or doing something like going to the scouting academy and kind of getting that background and being able to learn from other people who have done it in that regard. The other great resource is YouTube's actually a pretty good one too. You can kind of Google anything up out there now. There's something where you can at least get the baseline knowledge. And then from there, kind of, it depends on what you're looking for. If you want to do kind of the media route, then there are plenty of websites out there that you can reach out to and write for, and kind of that will let you get your start. Especially ones like on like Fansided or Sports Illustrated nowadays. Like they'll at least let you start out or give you a shot. And I know this is a semi-hot topic somewhat recently, but unfortunately, it's kind of, you're going to have to write for free. You're going to have to prove yourself. I know obviously that's not ideal, but
there shouldn't be anything wrong with that either.
No, and this, yeah. I mean, I completely agree with Andy on that part. It's a competitive industry. The supply completely outweighs the demand for the jobs, which is unfortunate, but kind of how it is. And then I think from there, like you can kind of, you can start putting out your articles once you have that background knowledge and have a place to write, or you can even start it on your own. Stuff like WordPress is free for if you really want to. It's just a little bit easier from the marketing side as far as getting eyeballs if you start at a different site. And if you want to get into the scouting world and kind of be a GM or a scout someday, the best thing you can do is, again, first of all, you got to have that background knowledge, is start reaching out to your kind of local colleges and asking to volunteer in any capacity possible. If you can, hopefully in the recruiting department, that's where I would start. But the biggest thing is, every college coach, especially the D1s and the bigger ones, they get thousands of emails every day between, coaches or people that want to get into recruiting of, hey, I want to work for you. I'll work for free. You got to be able to bring something else to the table. You got to be able to bring something that's going to add value to them. It's funny. I was sitting on a Zoom call about a month ago with Florida State's offensive coordinator, and that's exactly what he was talking about. He's like, anybody that wants to get in coaching, I look at what value can you bring to me. He said exactly what I said. I get 1,000 emails a day about people wanting to work for free, wanting to come in. That's no different. So you're no different if that's all you're offering me. Whether that be, you have X amount of years of background, or you know people in the high school ranks that can get them in, that can help with recruiting or that route. But yeah, that's kind of the biggest thing, is just basically, if you want to get into the scouting route, just find a way to get your foot in the door in any capacity, whether it be as like an equipment manager or right away in the scouting, get that foot in the door, start making connections, being the fly on the wall, being spoken when spoken to, not the other way around. It's funny, actually, with Expand the Box Score, we were able to meet with someone who's Brett Veach's assistant with the Chiefs, and he actually started with the Chiefs in HR. There's stuff like that. So even just getting in the door and getting your name, so that you're not just another blank email or a faceless resume. You're, Matt Holder or Andy Singleton or Brittany Schmidt with X resume and whatnot that can actually bring value.
Yeah, I would add.
Yeah, I mean, people, you think about it, and it's like people dream, of being like big, like the Sean McVays, 30-year-old head coaches too, and
But,
A
well,
lot of them, it just doesn't happen for them that way.
right. It's like all about, it's not so much what can you bring to the table that's different, right? Like what makes you stand out, like you had said, against all the other faces. A lot of people.
Yeah, but but Sean McVay kind of has started like a thing of the new trends of head coaches that they want. They want the younger coaches. They want the enthusiastic things, people that bring different things to the table. You got the McVays, the Rules, the LaFleurs, the Salas. That's the kind of guys that they really want now. They're kind of getting into a new direction with the head coaches in the NFL.
And it's funny, if you listen to McVay talk about how he broke in, he straight up admits, he's like, it was nepotism. I forget exactly what his family connection is, but he was connected to the Grudens, and then John Gruden brought him on after his college days. So, I mean, Sean McVay, he'll admit it would be, exactly, networking, and he got lucky. Yeah, you got to get a little bit of lucky, which sucks to hear, but.
I don't know how much time we have left, but I just wanted to add to this whole premise. Listen, those examples of young coaches are great, but don't think that those are still like 1 in a million. And those guys,
that's dream big. You know what I mean?
Dream right.
No, of course, but at the same time, those guys have all paid their dues.
Sure.
Have a plan. Figure out what you want to do, and be able to deviate from that plan if it calls for it, but stick to yourself as well. Don't go day by day. Set a goal for yourself. Like, I'm going to give it 2 years or whatever it is, and really go at it for 2 years. Set that time aside if you're really passionate about it. Going back to the coaches, I mean, we see it on Twitter. You'll see somebody that you're like, why doesn't this guy have more than 500 followers? And then somebody else who tweets out cat pictures has 5,000 in a week. Like, it's like, there's a lot of variance to this. But the game has changed so much. I mean, I don't mean this as a negative, so I hope it doesn't come out like that. But if football guys started today, would they be able to capture the same market share that they were able to? It's a different game, and there's so many more opportunities for people to get into it. So have a goal. Don't expect to make anything out of it, and just grind. I mean, go back and watch some of these documentaries. I mean, when you look at the one with Saban and Belichick, going back to their Cleveland days, and just talking about how they sleep on the couch and never go home. Like, they'd sleep in cars like this. I mean, it sounds crazy, but that's what it takes.
Look at them now. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
So,
can't argue with the results. So look what they're at.
Hard work. It's your dream. It's your passion. A little bit of luck probably involved. It's who you know. I mean, and I don't even really know if they knew what their path would be. Right. It just kind of happened to be that way, and I think we all kind of create our own path, and there are actions as a result. So there's just, it comes from you. So, I mean, if that's something that you're really interested in, then do what you can and try to stand out. And Matt, like you said, talk when spoken to, and just kind of be humble about the whole thing, I think. But at the same time, you have to be aggressive at the same time. So it's a tightrope.
Matt was saying,
it takes a lot of work, I mean, I'm a repairman. I couldn't do what you guys do. I'm just saying that right now. My hat's off to both of you. Just the amount of work you guys do.
Everybody's
yeah,
got a
and
role in
you
this.
you break it down for people like us who, we have a basic knowledge of the guys coming.
We just love the game. That's what we can
love
say.
the game, but you guys break it down for us even more, so we understand these players' strengths, their weaknesses, and ultimately how they would fit into the scheme that would be, potentially our team if drafted to.
Listen, there wouldn't be a role for guys like us if there weren't people, like you that love the game so much. So we're all dependent on each other. But one thing I forgot to mention about what Matt was saying, reach out, volunteer to be the ball boy or whatever on a team. You could do that, but every region has some form of a conference, whether it's D1, 2, 3, whatever. You can get credentials, you can show up. When I say have a plan, say I'm gonna go to all Patriot League games because I'm in the Northeast for this season, and commit to it. And go and be around the coaches and try to apply for credentials and go to the post games and introduce yourself to. It doesn't have to be the head coach. It could be the assistant coach. It could be the ball boy. You have no idea who's going to be able to get you into the meeting you need to be into.
Yeah, you never know who the other person knows. That's the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
That is true.
Yep. And since bit of an afterthought, but you guys mentioned the Grudens and McVay. John Gruden stole her Sharpie at Pro Bowl.
He did, 2010. He owes me a Sharpie.
Sounds
he
good.
Signed something from my uncle, and he just
walked off with it.
Put it behind his ear and walked off with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, now I know for sure now he can afford one, so you should definitely hit him up. So
yeah,
I mean,
when we see him,
John Gruden, if you're out there watching that, I still want my Sharpie. Maybe not the one you took because it's dried up by now, but get me a new one.
I will definitely use that as a talking point.
Yeah, well, that's the reason. He owes her a Sharpie. Now hire Matt.
Appreciate it.
Guys, but before we tie a bow on this show here, I want to give you the opportunity to just kind of, give your plug to your site or to whatever you're doing or whatever you want to share.
Go for it, Matt.
Follow it. Like we mentioned before, we got our draft guide out. Definitely appreciate any buys on that and any reviews as well, any feedback. We're always looking to get better. Follow me personally. My Twitter handle is right at the bottom there at mholder95. That's where you'll get all my 220 videos that Andy was talking about in the beginning and all my great draft takes that I'm sure nobody has any other different opinion on. So, I'm always willing to talk ball with anybody. So anybody wants to chat with me on there, follow me and reply to my stuff and I'll get back to you.
As for Expand the Box Score, it's not just the draft guide. We have advanced stats. It started with college. We have NFL as well. We have DFS tools if you're playing that. But literally any stat you could think of, we have it for college. You could customize your searches. You could search from conference to class to you could put receivers 5'11" and under with minimum 30 targets, and you could customize your search however you want it. That's what the site was built off of. And then, like I said, the scouting department came on in the last year. We built this draft guide, put it together, and we're just continuing to grow. The $12, it's literally, I mean, listen, the real reason we're charging it all is because these guys collectively put in over 10,000 hours of work. We'd like to be able to give it for free to everybody, but we also wanted to be able to print out and have a hard copy so, we could have these you could build up and have the 2021 edition, the 2020, whatever, and have a tangible in your hands guide. But to print out a guide of 350 plus players in full color is extremely expensive. And we don't have sponsors or advertisers, so we're doing it all out of pocket. So that's another reason we're trying to sell these, is to be able to have our final version printed out. It's to keep the lights on and to continue to grow and build on the tools and products we have to offer you guys. It's not for a summer home for anybody. Is what it comes down
you
to.
never have to explain yourself with pricing. We all got to make a living, to get by. It's a tough world, and you guys put in really hard work, and it shows in the dedication and the time you put into it. You deserve to get something out of it, and you know what? It's $12 freaking.
Yeah. And
divided by 10,000 hours, that's not a lot an hour. I'm just saying.
We've had a lot of we haven't had a negative review on this at all, from NFL executives to all the way down to the common fan and everybody in between. So if you're a fan, if you're using it for making decisions in a war room for a real team, it doesn't matter. You're gonna get a better sense of this draft class as a result of this.
And that's
Awesome.
really awesome.
Joey, any parting thoughts?
You know what? This has been great. Matt, I'm going to see you in the NFL one day. Trust me, I will.
Yes. Remember us when you make
And if
it
you could
big.
get Jerry Jones out of it and you take that GM position, please listen to the fans, please.
Yeah. Well, we talk about nepotism. I think those nepotism roots are too strong right there, but maybe one day.
Kind of.
But no, Andy, great feedback, great knowledge that I got from
Yes.
you guys. Were awesome. And I
Yeah,
wish
guys.
you guys
Thanks.
come back again and talk to us again later on again.
after the draft, if you could come in and talk to us about our picks.
Yeah,
I'm sure Carolina fans would love to hear your thoughts on who we picked, and if we could set that up, that'd be great.
Yeah, and we're gonna probably do something as a site on draft night. So try to get a bunch of people in. So we'd love to have you guys jump in as well. Maybe when the Panthers are on the clock and get a live reaction to it.
Oh my God, I love that.
I'll be there for the Cowboy one.
There you go. The nepotism thing.
I'm with Joe on this one.
Jason,
Okay, so Jeff and I
Garrett,
will take the Panthers. Tom and Joe will take the Cowboys.
Don't buy the nepotism thing too much though with the Cowboys, because Jason Garrett is not a Jones.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
True that.
it's true.
All right. Well, guys, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. I learned a lot. Hopefully our viewers did as well. And we look forward to talking to you later. And
hey, fandom, go out and buy this. This is $12. Just go get it.
Yeah, go buy the draft guide
right
for $12. Exactly.
Yeah,
I'm getting it right after the show.
Starbucks.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. Have a great night.
Thanks for your time. We appreciate
Thank you
it.
for joining us.
No problem. Thank you guys.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Christian McCaffrey in the open field, inside the 30, inside the 20.